First Person is produced in cooperation with the Far East Broadcasting Company, who rejoice in the stories of changed lives through the power of Jesus Christ. Learn more at febc.org.
I'm called to preach, I'm called to pastor, so the question of where I do that in some ways is very secondary. I'm a servant, and what could be greater than being used by our great God?
We'll introduce you to a pastor who first trained to be a lawyer on this edition of First Person. You'll meet Dr. John Munro of Calvary Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Wayne Shepherd, and welcome to First Person. I'm grateful that you've joined us for the latest interview in our weekly program, highlighting the stories of people who have given their life to Christ and given themselves in the Lord's service. We meet a variety of people, and all of our interviews are archived online for easy, on-demand listening at firstpersoninterview.com. You'll find hundreds of interviews there, firstpersoninterview.com. And look us up on social media at facebook.com/firstpersoninterview and leave your comments there. facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. Dr. John Munro's radio ministry is aptly titled The Verdict because he started out in life as an attorney. I think he would have been known as an advocate in his home country of Scotland. But he was soon called into the ministry and serves as senior pastor of Calvary Church in Charlotte. We spoke online recently, and he told me his story.
My career was in law, much to the consternation of my father, who had very little good things to say about lawyers. My older brother went into medicine, and my father and mother thought this would have been a good career for me, but I pursued law and believed that's where the Lord led me at that time and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, and this, of course, was home in Scotland?
It was, yes. I was there. I was a criminal prosecutor for some time in Edinburgh, and then latterly in a private practice doing mainly litigation.
Well, when did you become a believer? Were you a lawyer at that time, or did it happen earlier in life? Tell me the story.
Yes, I was privileged to have Christian parents, very God-fearing, who told me the gospel. And when I was at 12, my father recommended I go to a Christian youth camp along with one of my younger brothers. I'm one of 6 boys. And so my younger brother and I went. He's a year and a half younger. And we went to play sports. But there I heard the gospel, which I knew intellectually, knew some verses from Scripture. But there I heard the call of Christ to come. And in that boyish faith, I called out to Christ and was saved. For me, it was very dramatic. My life revolved around a soccer ball at that point, and I decided I was going to follow Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I saw some pictures online of you and your wife 50 plus years ago, and you looked like you could have played soccer very well back then.
Well, I love the game. How good I was is open to debate.
I mentioned your wife. She's from the Faroe Islands, so there has to be a story there of how the two of you met. What is her name?
Her name is Gudny, and she's there at the moment, actually. She left on Tuesday. There's a family celebration that she has gone to, and she came on a mission trip to Scotland with people from the Faroe Islands, and they chartered a boat from the Faroe Islands to Scotland, and the church I was attending at that time was sort of hosting these group of Scandinavians. Her English was very primitive. My Faroese was non-existent. Faroese is somewhat like Icelandic, and they also speak Danish because it's under the Danish crown. So I fell in love with her very easily, very quickly. I'd been praying for a Christian wife, and to my astonishment, she agreed to marry me, and so there it was. Quite a different cultural exchange, but one where we believe the Lord put us together.
Yeah, I love hearing stories like yours. So how does one understand God's call from being a lawyer and a prosecutor to becoming a pastor? How did that happen?
Quite dramatically, in fact. I loved the practice of law. I think it was, in God's grace, reasonably successful in it and had a good partnership. And one day when I was invited out for lunch by a fellow attorney, and in the middle of the lunch he asked me, he said, "Are you going to stay in law for the rest of your life?" And I said, "Well, absolutely. I love it." And I was a partner. Kind of the hard years were over, as it were, and it was time to reap some of the benefits. Later I found out he was wondering if I would go into an investment practice with him. Mm-hmm. But as I walked away, Wayne, as followers of Christ, we're indwelt by the Spirit. And I'm not a mystic by any manner of means. We Scots are pretty down-to-earth people, as you know. But the Spirit convicted me. And I thought, you answered that question very quickly, probably with a bit of arrogance, self-confidence. And that was the beginning of the Spirit doing a work in my heart and turning me into being a pastor and a preacher. Quite surprising. When I shared that with my wife, she was shocked. In fact, she could hardly talk about it for a bit, far less pray about it. But then we came mutually to the understanding that this was God's call in our life. So it happened in one way very quickly, and I'm a decisive person, and I felt, well, the Lord has really put that on my heart. And then, to make it worse from my wife and her family's perspective, I had read some books by faculty at Dallas Theological Seminary and had met a couple of graduates who were doing their PhDs in Scotland and learned about Dallas Seminary, and I thought, this is the very place where I need to go and study. Their theme is preach the word, keruxon ton logon in Greek, and I thought, this is what I want to do, and this is a great place to be trained. So it was very dramatic, astonished everyone, had to tell my partners who weren't too happy. And then a short time later, we found ourselves in Dallas, Texas, where we'd never been before, and sold up and found ourselves in the state of Texas, where everything is bigger, of course.
Yeah, that's quite a transition.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So have you been in America since that time?
Yes, other than I served in Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, for almost 4 years.
Oh, okay.
I'd done an internship there as a seminary student, and the church called me, so we were there for 4 years. But other than that, we've been in the States. It's a remarkable thing, Wayne. I'd always assumed that the Lord was going to take us back to Scotland. That would be, in a sense, my preference. I'm very Scottish, love Scotland, and just assumed that was where the Lord was going to have us. And that was not to be. And we sort of waited on the Lord, expecting Him to call there, but the Lord led us in a different direction. So here we are.
Yeah. I've seen some photos on Facebook of you wearing the kilt, and you carry that off very well. So there's no question you are Scottish. You're known as a preacher of grace and a shepherd of souls. That says it so well, but I'd love for you to comment on that if you would.
Before coming here to Calvary in Charlotte, I served in Michigan. And when I was contacted by the search committee, they'd got my name from some of my professors at Dallas. They asked for a resume, of course, and update a resume, and it's always difficult to put it in. And we Scots understate things where Americans kind of overstate. And I thought, how do I encapsulate who I am? Not my achievements, but the essence of my call, Wayne. And I came with this, that I'm a preacher of grace, but I'm not just a preacher. I don't want just to be someone on a platform. I really want to shepherd souls, because in my view, my call, these go together. And so that is how I kind of summarized it. And I found it a good reminder for myself in tough times to think, what is my calling? And my calling is to preach the word, the grace of God, be a preacher of grace, not of legalism, but of grace, and then to shepherd people. And as you know, our society is more and more broken. So every day, just as today, one of our staff, her brother died, probably suicide, and another death that we shepherd. And that is very much required. So I've used that as a kind of guide for myself and maybe to help other people understand who I am.
We're getting to know lawyer-turned-pastor John Munro on this edition of First Person. There's more to his story coming up.
Hi, I'm Ed Cannon, and as you know, situations around the world are changing quickly. Stay current with FEBC's ministry and get a deeper understanding of people who need to find hope. Hear how you can feel the pulse of God's Spirit moving through the hearts of believers dedicated to reaching the lost. Be sure you join me for the podcast Until All Have Heard.
Discover how the gospel is making a difference around the world. Search for Until All Have Heard on your favorite podcast platform or hear it online at febc.org. My guest is Pastor John Munro, M-U-N-R-O, and he is pastor of Calvary Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's the host of the radio program The Verdict, which obviously is a throwback to your days as a lawyer and prosecutor. So
Yes.
It's a very unique title, John. I like that very much. The Verdict.
Yeah, thank you.
You'll find that online and on radio as well. I have to say that grandchildren must be a very important part of your life because I see pictures of them all over. So
Yes, they are. We have one son who the Lord took from us during COVID in 21. We have three grandchildren who are aged presently 17, 14, and 13. Two boys and a young woman.
Yeah.
And they live about an hour from us in South Carolina, so
Okay.
they're very much part of our lives.
you mentioned your son. As a pastor, as a minister, you're not immune from the sorrows of life, and that had to be a tremendous blow to you and your family, your wife, to lose a son like that, a son that you had adopted when he was a baby, right?
Yeah, we adopted him when we were in Dallas as students. So as 2 days old, he was with us. And, we tend to think, don't we, as followers of Christ, that somehow we are immune from the storms and difficulties of life. And of course, that is a thoroughly unbiblical notion. But when it hits home, it is absolutely devastating, indescribable. And it occurred very quickly. It occurred when I was preaching. In fact, the pastor of worship, my wife had gone, knowing that our son was sick, had gone off to hospital. And I was coming to the conclusion of my message when the pastor of worship came over to me, which is highly unusual, and said, John, you need to go. And by the time I got to the hospital, the Lord had took him. And it's just a horrible, horrible situation. And then, of course, we tell our grandchildren and deal with that. And then to look up to Christ and to realize he's with the Lord. But here we are, and for the rest of our lives, he's not part. Yeah. As long as we stay on earth, he's not part of our lives. Mm-hmm. That's a difficult thing to grapple with, Wayne. But we deal with it, in a sense, every day. We deal with death and terminal illness. And as pastors, it's part of our shepherding. But when it hits home, it's tough. And I had to decide then, do I carry on? Is this time to retire, to step down? Because you feel like retreating. And it's just so difficult.
Christopher was in his 30s with his own family when he passed, and so here you are, a pastor who's normally the one who's offering the comfort and standing strong with families, and now you're in need of that. What was that like, John?
Very, very difficult because we know a lot of people, thousands of people, but it's not everyone that you want by your side. We took a few days off between the death and the funeral service. He died on a Sunday. The funeral was on a Friday. So we went down to the beach, walked the beach. Both my wife and I love the sea, coming from the places we do. And I remember walking and then saying to my wife, I think this is a good opportunity for me to step down. And my wife, who is much quieter than I am, she said, John, don't you, we believe that God called you to Calvary Church. And I said, oh yeah. And she said, do you sense he's calling you from that? And I said, well, I can't say that. I just feel that it's not something I really can handle. And she said, you know, we've got the Lord and we have each other, and the Lord will lead us through this. And that was wise, short. I needed to hear that to get back to the basics. That's something our call does. You're asking about a call, Wayne. It gets us, in times I think of difficult days, we think, okay, what is my call? Why am I here? What's God doing? And it's kind of a rock we can stand on. So we, in God's grace, have continued to pastor. The church wanted that. And not in I don't say this in any way of pride. I give God the glory. And I didn't really think of it at the time, but it has given us an opportunity to provide a model, certainly not a perfect model, of how we as followers of Christ deal with the storms of life. And it brings a sympathy, a compassion, a perspective. I could never understand some people feeling they were going to get drawn into a black hole. I thought, well, there must be, maybe not spiritually strong. And it taught me, no, I could easily be drawn into a black hole. In God's grace, neither my wife and I are naturally depressive, but if we had been, I can well imagine people just withdrawing, and it seems hopeless. You know, whatever the words, whatever the theology, my son is not here. And there's no one I can speak to on earth in the same way as I spoke to my son. But God has promised He is there for us, and He is ahead of us, and He's also with us.
That's well said, Pastor. You also obviously learn some lessons about grief that you can pass on to others, and we're all different, aren't we? We all grieve just a little differently, and we all want to say something, we want to do something, but very often it's not necessary.
No, I learned that because there's those who say too much. There are those who say, there were extremes I experienced, Wayne. There's a person that wanted to give me a little tidy lesson in theology, which all due respect, I know the theology. I know Romans 10, Romans 8:20. I've preached from it. I know it. I really didn't need to hear that. Then there were the people who we thought we knew, just almost totally ignored it. Felt they couldn't even come and say, I'm sorry. Whether they felt we would cry, I don't know. I will leave that with the Lord. But there were people, and not necessarily our closest friends, Wayne, that just came, and is the ministry of their presence. A card, a note, a hug. John, we're praying. And that we find doesn't bring our son back, but it is God's love coming to us through His people, and then the testimony of the Spirit, God's Spirit, reassuring us that we are the sons of God, as Paul says in Romans 8. There's the internal witness of, I'm with you, John. I love you. I care for you. But I would wake up at 2:30 in the morning. I couldn't get to sleep. I had difficulty reading Scripture. I had difficulty praying. I'm in turmoil. I'm in anguish. And that's part of grief. I realized there's no easy answer to that. I had to experience that. But it was a dark time for us.
We have to be very sensitive about how we respond to people.
Yes.
Thanks for those lessons to all of us listening, John. I really appreciate that. I didn't plan it this way, but very often I talk with people our age, I'll say, and past the age of culture saying you should retire, and we don't feel like the Lord is asking us to retire. Say more about that.
People, I say very kind of glibly when people talk about that, I say, do I look old? Why would you ask me that question? Then I say, don't answer that question. Yes, have we thought about it? Of course, we think about it. I've thought in my own situation here, Wayne, really, I think of three things. One is health. I mean, there are, whatever I feel I should do, my health may not permit me.
Yes.
So there's a question of health, and in God's grace, I've got the energy and the health so far. That could change today, of course.
Good point.
And then, secondly, what do the elders, the congregation, people who I regard as spiritual, if they said to me, John, we feel it's time for you to step down, people who are godly.
And you've communicated that to them, no doubt.
Yes, and I have discussed it, and we'd hope that wise spiritual people would say that to me, and I've said that to my wife, And then third, again, and in some ways the most important, again, is the call. Do I? And I realize our ego might get in the way there, but as we're in prayer before the Lord, how do I sense God's call? I do not want, as I'm sure you don't, we don't want to do something against the will of God. If it's God's will for me to step down as pastor at Calvary Church, I would do that, and I'd do it gladly. I mean, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. That's who we are. God has called me to this position. And so if I felt in the depth of my soul that it was time, that the Lord wanted me to do that, I trust I would be obedient and not impose my will on His. And there are many days I would gladly say, yes, Lord, I hereby resign.
Well, your points are well taken and very helpful to a lot of people, I'm sure, who are listening, who are perhaps struggling with that question. And, transition is one thing. The word retirement is something else. We don't retire from the Lord's work.
Yes. And my wife says to me, John, if you left Calvary, what would you do? I said, well, I'd preach somewhere. And she said, well,
sure. Try to stop me. Huh?
I'm called to preach. I'm called to pastor. So the question of where I do that in some ways is very secondary. I'm a servant. Paul says, we're your servants for Christ's sake. We preach not ourselves, but we're your servants for Christ's sake. So where's the Lord going to have me serve? Here I am. I'm His servant. Please use me. And what could be greater than being used by our great God?
You've been listening to Pastor John Munro from Charlotte, North Carolina, where he serves at Calvary Church, a church with a long, faithful ministry. I mentioned his radio program is called The Verdict, and you'll find links to both his church and his program at firstpersoninterview.com. Before leaving today, I want to thank the Far East Broadcasting Company for the support, which makes it possible for us to bring you these weekly interviews. FEBC will soon be celebrating its 80th anniversary, and I invite you to read more about FEBC and even listen to the podcast until all have heard at febc.org. Ed Cannon joins me each week on the podcast to tell some of the behind-the-scenes stories of how God is using FEBC to reach the unreached and train people in the Word of God. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us next time for First Person.